Good morning and welcome back. I'm Natalie and today we're going to be doing a little bit of work with the Etch Quill and hopefully the Quill too. So I'll just wait for a few moments for a few people to join us. And good morning Thea. Morning Deb. Oh, I'll have one too please Deb. Milk, 2 sugars. So, I've pulled out a few different things to play with. I've pulled out some wooden tags. Now, these ones are 2mm thick and this one's 3mm thick. So, obviously, this isn't something that I would overly be wanting to put in my Scan and Cut. But I wanted to talk about a few different ways that we can work with thicker items. Good morning, Carol. Hi, Mum. So, for those of you that might have missed the news yesterday, we have a new project notebook that has just launched on Amazon. So it's going to have the same layout as this for the project pages, but it starts off with a bit of an intro to Canvas, so it goes through shortcuts and tooltips, so which tools you use for which features. So that may be something you're looking for. So now that I've done that very quickly, I've pulled out some Quill USBs to work with, because we want to use the Etch Quill today. One of the things you do need to use is something that has a single line. So that could be that you use a drawing font that's on your machine if you have the SDX range. It could be that you use a single line font in Canvas if you are still using the CM range. And thank you, Thea. Yep, it is very useful. So even if you have the cheat sheet for Canvas, it goes into a bit more detail than what we can fit on there. So we've got a bit more information about each of the tools and the different icons. And it's going to be a good lead in to the next book. So the next book is going to be all about moving on from the kind of first cuts which we did in book 1. We're going to be looking at the add-ons. We're going to be doing a bit of canvas work, and we're also going to be doing some advanced techniques with the machine itself. So that is already underway. So I've been busy little bit. And good morning, Linda. So out of the quills that I have, the different USBs, I'm going to go for the Amy Tangerine ones because we've got some nice bold sentiments in here. And you're going to be wanting to work with things that are bold, simple. It's not going to give you the effect you're looking for if you're going to do something very intricate. And to be honest, I'm going to be working with these as an outline. And then I'm going to show you a few different ways that we can actually embellish with them. So, good morning, Sally. Okay, so you can either put your USB into your computer and use Canvas, or you can go direct to your machine, which is what I'm going to be doing today. Now, before I go too far ahead, let's introduce you to the Etch Quill. So I'm using mine with an adapter from 3D Fingerprints, if I can say it. So this makes it a little bit easier for loading it into the SDX range than the actual adapter that comes with it. It just works just a little bit easier, feels a bit more stable when you're putting it in. So it's worth investing in these. You get 3 in a set, I believe. So you've got enough there for your Quill and also for your Etch Quill. And these just screw in. So if I unscrew this briefly, you see you've got your same screw fed on there as you would have with your Quill. And at the business end we have this lovely sharp point. Now it is sharp, you don't want to be stabbing your finger on it, so do take care when using it, and also take care when storing it so that nothing is damaging the tip. So if you can, store it in the little tray in your SDX or in a nice holder for your CM range. And the Etch Quill comes with these little plastic pieces, so this is going to be one of the first ways I'm going to work with it. And they all come with a little protective film over the top and bottom, so you want to take those off. You'll also usually find that the little hole sections are still in there, just because that protective film can be a good way of kind of managing to get it off if you haven't got a lot of nails to work with. But we'll see how we go. So, have you all had a good weekend? Did you get to do some crafting? And what projects are on your desk? So, there's one side. And let's see if I can get the other. Might be that. I've already taken it off, but I'll just double check. Good way to tell is if you just look around the edge, if you can see like a halo, probably means that your protective sheet is still attached. It can be a little fiddly to get them off. Just take your time. What I wouldn't advise is going and getting like a poker tool or something like that, because potentially you could scratch your surface before you even start. Come on. There's always one, isn't there? There we go. Once you get it released, then we can pull it off. And you'll find that one side comes off nice and easy and the other side's going to be kind of clingy. And it's just how they're cut. So, there we go. So with those removed, we have our disc ready to actually etch onto. And let's prepare our mats next. So try and avoid putting your fingers straight in the middle of your tag. You're going to work with a nice new mat, or certainly a sticky mat, because you want something that's going to be able to hold on to your tag. You're going to move it down from the edge. Oh, don't do that either. And let's put our hole up towards the top, and we're going to stick that down onto our mat. Now, if you have zigged your mat, you may want to keep that protective film on the bottom. The reason I say that is you don't want any adhesive to transfer up to your plastic. Whereas I know this one will be fine. If you do get any adhesive on the back, you can clean it off with a little alcohol. So now we've got that one there, we kind of need to highlight where it is so that we can see it nice and easily when we scan it. So this is going to be where you're going to want to have some colourful washi. Now, one I have tanned isn't that colourful, but let's see what we can do. So I'm going to try and get it so it's going to go along this blue line here, and I'm going to line that up underneath. And I'm going to pop it over the top because we don't want to accidentally go where the hole is. So my washi is going over the top of that hole. So kind of have somewhere to go to as a reference. So I'm going to work around the outside and just give myself a little bit of a guide. Now, apart from that top bit of washi, all of these are going around the outside rather than over the top of the plastic. And the idea is that when we do a background scan, because they're clear, obviously if we were to just leave that as is with no masking tape, we wouldn't necessarily be able to see where it is on the mat. So just take your time to do this, and you're going to give yourself a little bit of a helping hand. Okay, there we go. Now, what I would say is, if you want to do any kind of border detail, obviously you're going to want to take that bit off. But for starters, let's concentrate on this centre section here. I know the puppies were so sweet. I really, really wanted to, but it just won't be fair here. So, I'm going to attach my Amy Tangerine USB to my extension cable. So when we're working with USBs on our machine, I always recommend using the a USB extension cable into that socket. So that means that when you're changing USBs, you're doing it into a £5 cable rather than a £500 machine. So if at some point it does go faulty, it's just replace the £5 cable and not the £500 machine. So let's turn on the scanner cup. I'm going to change view. Oh, now that'll be useful if that didn't go so big, wouldn't it? There we go. I'll turn it off for now. So I'm going to let that initialize. And because we're using USB, we're going to go to Retrieve Data, USB. Now, if you're not familiar with the Etch Quill USBs, you have two main folders. The left-hand one is a PNG one. So that's where you want to use it as an image file. So it could be that you want to take it and do some sublimation work with it. It could be that you want to actually take it into your digital crafting. So if you're a digital scrapbooker, for instance, you can use these USBs with that as almost image maps if you want to. So you can pop in your digital papers and things like that into your actual images and then print them out. Now, the SVG folder is what we're going to be using with the scan and cut. And you're going to see that each USB is divided up into folders. So these folders are going to change per USB. So we've got alphabets for where we just want to literally do a name. We have animals, flies and shells, arrows, birds, everyday icons, flowers, food, fruits, huts, icons, emojis, leaves, plants and trees and Madonna frames, music and punctuation marks, stationery stitching, travel, vacation and weather, and words. So guess which one I'm going to use? Yep, we're going to go into words. And you're going to see that each file then has a file name and a file type. So at this point, at this particular junction, we're not going to have a preview of the file. So everything goes on that file name. That's something important to consider when you are creating your own SVG USBs, is that you want your file names to accurately reflect the contents of that file. So I just want something that's going to be nice and simple. Let's go for love. So we can see there's the file with our love, and we can go OK to add that to our mat. So there's no sizing or anything to worry about when we're doing that from USB. And we can go into edit, we can go to object edit, and we can still do things like filling the shape if we want to. So what I would say with etching, if you are all concerned about how well your shape is adhered to your mat, don't use fill. just because if you are finding that things aren't lining up, fill can sometimes actually create almost a double image. So sometimes you're better off doing these things manually. But as I'm using a new mat, I should be okay, so I'm going to turn that on. We can choose our fill pattern. So solid is literally going to do your lines nice and close together. You've got stripy for where you want to actually spread those lines out a bit. You've got a grid. Now obviously, there's two ways of using the grid. You can keep the grid as it is, you can keep it upright and it look like squared paper. But if we actually turn that grid, you can actually make it start to look a bit like cross hatching. Now, number 4 and number 5, I always say try and avoid using them because I do find that they do tend to knock out the calibration. So, unless there's a very specific reason for using them, try and just stay clear of those. So, examples that you might want to use them is if you want to create like a pattern background, for instance, with your foil quill. You could use number 4 and go much bigger, so actually scale up your pattern, and then you will find that you'll have a much easier time. What is wrong with me today? Gee. So I'm going to go OK. Then we have fill line spacing. So this is how big a line that you think your etch quill is going to draw. Now you can leave that at default and give it a go, or if you want to test it on a spare piece of material, you can do. Fill direction is literally the angle that's going to draw those lines. So if you want to rotate it, and indeed with some patterns you'll find that it's better that you rotate it, that is where you're going to be doing it. So if we go OK, you're going to see that now our love has turned blue. And I'm just going to go OK for now. And the next thing that we really need to do is to load our mat and do a quick background scan. So I'm going to load in the mat to the machine. Now another important thing to note is that I currently have my scan bar in the up position. So whenever we're working with anything thicker, we want to make sure that it is definitely up and away from our material. The same with anything that we are concerned might actually scratch or damage our scan glass. So in terms of the plastic here, but that could also be certain types of glitter card, for instance. So if you've got something that has the really chunky glitter, make sure that you take that scan bar up out of the way, and then you should be a bit better. Now, don't ever cut anything that's going to shed unless you've found some way of treating it to keep that glitter kind of compacted to that card. So let's do a background scan. And if you're working with a larger piece of plastic or wood, just make sure that you just support that mat as it goes through, so it's not peeling off. Okay, so now we can see where our tag is. We can see where we've put that washi across to say that, you know, there's the hole, don't go in that area there. And we can take our love and move it into the middle. Now we can go and resize it. So I'm going to take that down quite a little bit. And we want to make sure that we're well away from those edges. Okay, so we can go OK. And now we can go into move, and we're going to zoom in. So it's much easier when we're working with something smaller to zoom in and just do our double checks. So now when we zoom in, we can see that we have our lines going across for our fill. We're also going to want to make sure that we move that love. So it's going to be down a little bit and across the fraction. There we go. So we're as close to the centre as we can get. We're going to go OK. OK. And OK again. We're going to go to draw. And because we're using our Etch Quill, we're going to pop that into our holder. And lock that in place. Now it can feel a little odd about putting it in there because it's quite a small connection to what we're used to, or a small tool. So just make sure that everything is round the right way. The two lines go to the back and you should be good to go. In terms of your settings, we're going to slow that draw speed right down. So if we try and go too quick, you're going to find that it can risk skipping, which we want to try and avoid. So if we go a little bit slower, hopefully we can avoid some of that. Does the Etch Quill have to heat up like the Foil Quill has to? No, it is literally standalone. So there's no USB power pack needed. It's just literally a pointy sharp object that is just going to scratch the top surface of the plastic. And the draw pressure, I'm going to put it up very slightly to -4, and I'm going to work up from there. Just because we want to make sure that we're not causing too much skipping and it's not trying to puncture the plastic. Ideally what you want is it to kind of skim over the top, and it is better to do that several times to build up that etch than to try and just go for it. So I'm going to go OK, and let's go start. Now, because I'm using the 3D Fingerprints little adapter, it's just going to say attach appropriate holder. I'm going to go OK and just type start again. Now, if you were working on a larger object, and there are some bigger pieces, if I go back overhead for a moment. So we have some really big pieces as part of the kit. If we were to work on this, what you could do is actually use your foil glue pen setting, so that instead of the whole piece going in and out of your machine, you're actually doing it bit by bit, so that any bits that you are doing aren't necessarily being taken back into your machine. But on something like this little keyring, it's not going to make enough of a difference to make it worthwhile. Now again, just be aware that if you are doing that, when you do use the foil glue setting, it does it in bands. Okay, so if you are finding that you are having any kind of movement with your plastic as it's etching, then you are going to want to avoid that and just etch it as normal. Okay. Is there any questions so far? So I have pulled out some paint pens so that I can actually do a little bit of work onto the back of our plastic too. So the type of paint pens that you're looking for is anything that will dry onto a non-permeable surface. There you go. So something that will work on glass, plastic, metal. So I have actually pulled out some dirt line painters, or paint pens as they're known. So if you see either of those, they're essentially the same product. And we can draw with those freehand. but they will also fit in your 3D Fingerprints adapter too. Okay, so what we want to do is just double check how that's done. And if I go back to close cam, let's see if I can pick it up on the camera. Maybe it's going to struggle because of the distance, but I can see that there's kind of a sheen where the love is, and if you run your finger across, you can feel there's kind of a matted area. Now, how much etch you want is up to you. So if you're happy at this point, you can take it off and then carry on and play with it. If you want to etch it a little deeper, you can do. If you're working with something like, you can get like the light up frames, then you are going to want to go a little bit deeper. But I think for what we want, that should be okay. Now obviously you want to make absolutely certain before you peel anything off that you are happy. Because even if you leave this outline in place, there's no guarantee that you'll get that pull right back in that same spot. So I'm just lifting it carefully, and there we go. So let's put it back in the machine for now. There we go. And overhead. So there you go. You can see the love. Now, if you want to bring that out a bit more, we can actually paint onto the back. So if I pop that onto a surface and you're thinking it's going to get a bit lost, then you can certainly flick it over and we can do a bit of work from the back. So let me see if I turn off the overhead light, if you can see that bit better. It's a little bit better. Try and click and do it so you can see it. Let's try a bit of. It's a bit fun to try and get you to be able to see. Let's go back, because you're kind of going to get a bit glare. But hopefully once I start painting it, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So there's a few different paint pens that we can use. We could use the Derwents. So let's pull out a pink. We could use the Fly-C paint pens, and if you want to kind of see a few more paint pens, you can go on our Amazon store and you'll find those on there. Now, as we're working from the back and it's a transparent surface, what you want to bear in mind is what you put down first is what you're going to see at the front, then everything else is in the background. So let's just give that a quick shake. It's been a while since I've used these. We're just going to follow that outline around. Okay. And then I can start to just blend this down. So all I'm doing is just blending that with the very tip of my pen. And don't worry if it kind of looks a little scratchy at this point, because we can actually sort a lot of that out with the next coat. and by the time you get down to the bottom, you kind of want to be back to your clean pen, if that makes sense. So next, it actually works better for me on black, so I'm going to pop that back on black. And we're going to start off by just lining that top. Like so. I'm just going to take that colour down. Okay. And turn this side. So even if you don't get your outline absolutely perfect first time, you can tidy it up when we come to the next section. It's better to be under your outline than over the top. Could you use Posca pens or normal marker pens? Posca pens, yes. Alcohol pens, to a certain extent, you could use them, but you are going to want to give them some sort of protection over the backing once you've actually finished creating with those. So that could be that you apply clear vinyl if you're working on something thicker, or with something like this where we're going to be working with a thinner shape and then adhering it onto something else. If you're using resin to do that purpose, then you're going to be just fine. Now, if you are finding that you're getting lots of fingerprints, a bit like me, then when you are done, you want to very carefully clean around the painted area. It's really important that I emphasise that you want to go around the painted area, otherwise you risk pulling some of that paint back off, which we don't want to do. And I'm kind of working in bands. So if you're familiar with something like the chameleon pens, where you have a pen that's going to fade from one colour to the other, then you'll be used to kind of colouring like that. Let's just grab a piece of card. And you just want a piece of scrap that we can just come on, there we go. Well, that's still wet straight in, and just blend little strokes backwards and forwards across the width. And we're nearly there. So all this work is being done from the back. Meaning that it's going to be away from like the kind of high pressure or high vulnerability on like a keychain and things like that. But if it's going to be more decorative, there's nothing stopping you also doing a bit of work on the front too, to kind of get like a relief. I'm just going to pop a bit more of that paler pink back up through here. There we go. So now And when I turn it over, we have our love. Ta-da! So, you do want to let this dry totally before you try and actually store it up the other way. It must have been 3-in-1 pens you used that I was thinking of when I first came out. That would be the Crafter's Companion ones, the tri-blend pens. Yeah, the Chameleon pens actually have much smoother transition because you're actually applying that colour direct to the pen. So I have some Chameleon fine liners that I've used on stream, so if you go back and watch those you can see that. But you can actually use those in a similar way in your machine if you're feeling brave. So what I would say is with any fine liners that you want to use in your machine, get a separate set, because what you'll find as you draw with them, they kind of get a flat blunt end, so that you which is great for the machine, but when you come to then try and write with them or colour with them, they're just no good, because we're not designed as human beings to colour with pens that are upright like this. We're always going to be working on a slight angle at the very least. So if we've kind of got blunt end there, it kind of looks a bit scratchy, and they can even start to get a bit of a calligraphic feel. So just be aware of that. So hopefully you've enjoyed that little bit of an Etch Quill moment. And as I said, you just want to pop that so the paint side is face up and just let that completely dry. Once it's dry, you can then go back over with the lighter pen, and you're going to find that's going to blend and fill in those little gaps that you get just because you're working with little fine tips onto acetate. Yeah, I prefer alcohol pens that have brush tips, are my favourites, because I like to do lots of things like hair and fabric and things like that with my markers. But the Chameleon pens are a different approach. So while we're here, I thought that I would try something a little bit different. So this may work or it may not work. We'll see how it goes. But I'm going to do some foiling, and I'm going to do some foiling onto one of the acrylic blanks. So these are still out of the Etch Quill set, and I have a little offcut of foil just here, and I'm going to trim this down because basically we want it to be so it's more or less the same size as our little tag here. Now obviously we don't want our foil to go onto our mat, but at the same point we also kind of need a little extra just to get hold of with our masking tape. So I'm going to cut it to fit my piece to start with. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the protective sheet off one side. That's going to be the side that I put face up. So let's go. Let's see which side is going to peel for me nicely first. There we go. So I'm going to pop that down onto my mat. Again, I'm going to work 1 inch in from the left and 1 inch in from the top. And let's get my masking tape. I'm going to mask around my shape. So let's see if I angle that down there if we can see. Okay, so I'm going to place my first bit of masking tape along that edge and place that down. So the closer we can get to the edge, the better, because obviously if we're working with foil, we definitely want to avoid getting it on our mat. Yeah, I love blending alcohol pens. But the chameleons can be fun too, because you can kind of go between like 3 different colours, and they're not necessarily 3 colours that you would instantly think of going between. I'm just going to tear a few smaller pieces of masking, and I'm just going to put those around the details. Now make sure that that is sticking down to the mat. I'm going to put a little bit up that side of my arrow and a little bit that side. Okay. So now, before we go too much further, we're going to go back to our machine. Oh, come on. Let's get a bit of focus going. So I'm just going to go, okay, let's see if we can get this focus back. Come on. Over here. There. Oh, there we go. I'm going to go and reset that for a second. And let's go to pattern. We're going to go into draw. And we have this little font here. Now, obviously, this doesn't work the same way as the fonts do when we're actually using the type section of the STX. So these letters are actually all individual. So they're really good for short words, but if they're going for a sentence, it's going to take a little bit longer for you to do. So let's go for F and add another one, pattern, draw, back to our text, and not quite that far down. We're going to go for U. We're going to add again, pattern, draw, back into our text, and we're going to get an N. So at this point I haven't worried about setting the size or anything. It's just literally putting those characters onto the mat. We're going to go to Edit, Multi-Select, Select All, and that's going to pick everything on the mat. We're going to go OK, Object Edit and Group. So straight away that's saying we're going to take that and we're going to lock that in place. Then we can resize if we need to, but before we do that, we're just going to go and do a background scan again. Now while that's doing that, I'm going to start my foil quill heating. Okay. So now that we've got a scan, we can go to Edit, Object Edit, Resize, and we can take that right down because it's got to go. Oh, not that far. Onto our little banner just here. So I'm going to go OK once I'm roughly in the right size, and then we can go Move, Zoom, and we're going to go up to that 400% so we can see a lot bit bigger. We're going to move that across, and we can see even with that size, it's still running a little too close to that top and bottom. So I'm going to go OK, OK, back to Object Edit, Resize, and just take that down just a little bit more. Then I go OK, OK, back to Move, back to zoom, back to the 400, and have another look at the alignment. So that's looking pretty good. We can go OK, 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 and OK again. We're going to put our foil on top. And I'm going to use some more of that masking tape. So I'm going to fix it at that side. Let's move that camera out so you can see. So I've got to this side here. So we know the sides of our little arrow are really clear of any foiling, so we can use those to attach nice and strongly. Then if you want to, or if you think that your foil is wrinkling at all, then you can use a bit of tape to the top and bottom. But I think just for this one, I'm just going to try and go with it like that. If it goes wrong, then it's on me, but yeah, it should be fine. Pastels, I saw a set in, let's get the right one. I saw a set in Lidl, I think it was. So if Lily has been particularly good, you could get a few of her own. So I've just popped in the foil quill, which should now be warm enough. I'm going to go to draw, and it's using the fine tip, which is probably a good size for the actual scale of the text that we're using. And we're currently on -4, so I'm going to take that down to -6. So as a rule, your foil tips, your bold is going to be -2, your standard is going to be -4, and your fine is going to be -6. And that's generally a good place to start. And we'll see how that goes. Let's see, did that work? No, not quite. Hey ho. Let's go for a slightly bigger bit of foil then, just so that you can get a bit of actual tension on it. But that's why I work with fingerprints. When did you see the pastels? It was at the weekend. Oddly enough, I was looking for the watercolours to see if they had them back in. What they have had back in Lidl's, and I know it's definitely Lidl's, is the paintbrushes. So that's definitely one to have a go and retrieve or purchase. Now, plenty of tape. There we go. I'm going to put some tape to the top and bottom this time. And if you run your finger across the top, you should feel where the plastic kicks in. So there's a little bit just there that we can kind of get hold of. There we go. Take two. Let's try again. peel away that foil just to see if it's gone. Oh, hey! That worked. So let's see if I can pick that up again. There we go. You can see. We have fun. So what I would say is, in terms of wear and tear for your foiling on your acrylic, best thing to do is just go over the top with a little resin, and that's actually going to protect that foil long term. As much as you are melting foil onto the plastic, and you do want to kind of give a little bit of resilience, especially if it's something like a scrapbook layout, or something that you're going to want to have last for a long time. There we go. Set my camera back and peel that off, and we'll go back overhead, and let's grab a piece of paper again, and we can see that we have a very nifty little fun. So I may also do a couple with the USB, but I think that's pretty fun to do. So in terms of then turning that into an embellishment, you could actually back it onto some pattern paper if you wanted to make it a bit easier to do that into your layout. You could actually paint the back in much the same way as we did the keyring, so that you can actually get it to blend into your design that way. Or if you're working with a different shape, so let's say you're working with, let's say, a tag, what you can actually do is you can actually layer that over your photo so that you're actually protecting your photo underneath. So if you are having trouble with getting your images to have longevity, particularly if you are printing at home and you're printing onto a glossy cardstock with a laser, for instance, you can find that sometimes the tone starts to flake off over time. So by doing that and putting a protection over the top, you can actually make that photo last longer. And there's lots more ideas that we can get into with using transparent bases. So what I may do is I actually have a transparent scrapbook. So if there's an interest, I was thinking it might be a really cool thing to do a workshop on, so that we're actually working with transparency and working with planning our projects so that they're in essence two-sided. Because obviously if you stick something to the back here, you then want to also have something that's going to cover over the back of that object on the opposite side. And also then you get into really interesting things about how you can play with depth between your different pages of acetate. So, any questions? I may have to take a trip out to Lidl to see if there are any hassles in and get Lydia own set. Yep, it's either Lidl's or Aldi have pastels and charcoal sets in. Lidl's also had in yesterday some actual etch lights, so where we can use our etch tool and actually work onto an actual plastic piece that actually comes in the kit, and then when you've done your etching, it slots into a light base so that when the light goes up through it, you can really see your etching, and that's a really cool effect. So I'm hoping that we're able to still have one of those next time I go, so I can get it. They also have some etch tools, so actual etching pen which is battery powered. Can't say it will go in your scanning cup, but you're certainly going to be able to hand hold it and actually do some designs, and that comes with stencils too. Yeah, could easily be Aldi, but the etching is definitely Lidl's. The brushes are definitely Lidl's. What else did I see last night? There's also some different little craft kits. So if you're looking for a little taster, there's something there too. Hopefully you've had fun and that's given you some ideas. And I'm going to go away, give this another coat, and then when that's dry I'll pop up a photo. So have fun, and I will see you possibly Friday, if not before. We'll see. Depends on workload, but you might start to see that you get a few extra streams popping up. There's also going to be a new time. So the time is going to be 4 p.m. from here on in. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, hopefully so that we can get a few more people actually interacting with the live. Number two, Ian has a bit of an announcement going on. He's been successful in his first audition at the age of, well, yeah. He's left it a bit late to decide now he's going to do the audition thing. So he's actually going to be taking part in the opening of the Commonwealth Games. So if you want to see him on TV, it's actually going to be televised. And I will put up some details a bit closer to the time, because I know that the Commonwealth Games are pretty much televised sort of throughout the Commonwealth. So if you are watching in Australia, you're going to be able to watch that too, which is somewhat tickling me at the moment. But his rehearsal schedule is going to be kind of later in the day, so it's going to be a good time to kind of do some lives with you. There's also going to be a paid workshop going up, which I've kind of been looking at writing this morning, so if you're eagle-eyed you'll have seen a very quick flash of it. Oh, Sally, you're actually going, cool. Let me know if you'll be going to the opening, and I will pass that on to Ian. So 4 o'clock on Friday, Ian and I will be doing a stream for Pretty Gets Gritty. So that's definitely one to be watching, and I might get him to talk a little bit more about the Commonwealth Games and what he's doing. But also Lucy is actually working at the Commonwealth Games too, so I will go into a few more details. So take care. Are you going swimming? Now if you were going to gymnastics, you might hear what Lucy's doing, but that's a little bit of a preview. So I'll see you Friday for definite, if not before, and take care, have fun, and look forward to seeing you then. Take it, bye.